This video is made possible by the good people over on my Patreon. Hello and welcome to episode 2 of the ToNW Wessex character profiles. This time we're looking at the cheeky, mouth-running Stonewith Yard pilot himself, the Great Western Railway 8750 Rooke. So without further ado, let's get into this. Rooke emerged from Swindon Works in April 1934, numbered 8796, as one of the 8750 variants of the 5700 panniers. The 8750s were a development from the 5700s, using an updated design which included an improved cab with a higher roof, rectangular windows and grilles as opposed to the round windows of the 5700s. The 8750s were also fitted with sliding shutters and hinged doors for more protection from the elements for engine crews. Finally, vacuum brakes, steam heating and automatic train control were fitted as standard. With a tractive effort of £22,515, Rooke and his siblings were powerful additions to the GWR tank engine roster. Rooke himself was allocated to the island from New, taking over from a small prairie number 4526, initially on duties such as local passenger trains and pick-up goods work. Rooke only gained his name a few months after he'd arrived on the island. The name Rooke is an anglicisation of the Middle English Rook, which roughly translates as fog or vapour. This was the nickname given to the tribal leader of Samarinia during the Roman invasion of the island. The name was given due to his ability to evade the Roman legions for decades, appearing to perform surprise attacks on the garrison at Winchester, escaping again, slipping through the Romans' fingers like fog or vapour. Rooke heard the story and decided to use the name for himself to give him a link to the island's history, a fitting name for such a dedicated servant to the island. The fleet on the branch line was very different at the time Rooke joined to that of the fleet seen in the Tales of New Wessex. A 4300 Mogul, 4500 and 4575 Small Prairies, an Aberdare, Pilot the 5700, and Railway Matriarch Bride were all stables of Stonewith Shed at this time. Rooke was taught the basics and given the island's history by 4526, but once he was done, 4526 was reallocated off the island and the two would never meet again. Rooke grew close with Pilot during their time working the branch together. They shared their work, with one shunting and performing light goods work, whilst the other covered passenger work. They would spend long nights in the shed at Stonewith chatting away, Pilot's insane theories making Rooke laugh uncontrollably for minutes at a time. Both engines were sad when Pilot was moved to Alfriston after the war. 3 years after Rooke arrived on the island, in 1937, the line's 4575 was replaced by a new build 6400 pannier tank called Ben. Thus began the modernisation of the railway's fleet, and Rooke took the young Ben under his wing, so to speak, teaching him all he was taught by 4526 and Pilot. Ben and Rooke, as a result, are still close friends to this day, Ben looking up to the 8750 as a big brother figure in his life. In 1938, Mogul 4302 was withdrawn from service and replaced with a large prairie called Oliver, and Aberdare 2634 was replaced by a 5205-280 tank engine named Shaw, who revolutionised the goods traffic on the branch, and thus removed the need for Rooke to perform most of his pick-up goods duties. Rooke found so much change to be very upsetting, and confided in Bride, who comforted the little tank engine. It was soon found out that both withdrawn locos had been swiftly taken to Swindon and unceremoniously scrapped, parts from 4302 being used to help build a grange. There was little time to mourn, as just around the corner lay World War II. During the conflict, the branch, and the island as a whole, was plunged into a state of chaos. Troop trains ran to the island's ports almost daily, requiring Rooke's assistance to deal with coaching stock around Stonewith. The supply of the Samarinian naval ships led to an unprecedented amount of goods work up and down the line. Rooke, Pilot and Ben were all taken off trip working and were glued to the docks and sidings of Stonewith as they sorted men, munitions and supplies for the war effort. In 1941, Rooke watched as the Samarinian naval flotilla left Stonewith Bay on a routine convoy escorting mission. Little did he know that he was the final loco to see the entire flotilla in one piece. Later that week, the flotilla returned, one ship down, and with others carrying substantial damage. The fleet had fought with the mighty Bismarck and came off worse for it. Later that month, with the Germans now well aware of the naval force that New Wessex had, the Luftwaffe performed a night raid on the island, focusing on the docks at Repmouth and Stowmouth, as well as munition factories in Alfriston, New Harlech and Retford. Rooke was narrowly missed by one of the strafing Bf-109s at Stowmouth. The bombs dropped did little to no damage, exploding harmlessly in the bay, missing the naval ships at anchor. Rooke's resilience that night won him the admiration of many engines and locals alike, as even through the bombing and the strafing, he'd kept working to resupply ships at the dockside, and his efforts in the cleanup operation meant the docks were continuously fully operational. Once the war was over, Ben went back to hauling his passenger service to Alfriston, and Pilot was relocated off the branch to help with work at Alfriston's shed. Rooke largely continued as he had in wartime, becoming much more of a station pilot for Stowmouth and shunter of the docks and yards in the area. He continued to cover late notice good traffic and some regular small shipments to Stowborough or Castle Stovell. Rooke refused to allow Lord Stovell to send him off for repaint in 1948 when the GWR became BR, and continued to wear the GWR green he'd received after the war until well into the early 50s, when Lord Stovell managed to finally convince him by giving him a lined black livery. This making him unique on the island, and on a par with his siblings that worked in and out of Paddington on station pilot duties there. Rooke wore his new livery as a mark of distinction, although with the nature of his work it was more often than not completely covered in dirt. He made an effort to be clean for special occasions such as the arrival of the Stowmouth Pullman workings and other such special trains to the harbour. Rooke was part of the welcome party for the huge batch of Manners that descended on the island during 1951, and became good friends with 7834 Rodley Manor, who eventually would stay on the branch to help Oliver with rising passenger numbers. As Tales of New Wessex starts, we see Rooke as a happy-go-lucky kind of engine who is easily wound up, but also very happy to mess around with his colleagues, and isn't scared to push the line with Lord Stovell. His quick wit ensures he is popular with all the engines, and although his tendency to call Lord Stovell Stovey can get him in trouble, Lord Stovell respects his hard work and loyal service to the railway, especially his quick and humble acceptance of the Stowmouth pilot work, where he could have easily complained and refused to allow himself to be confined to such a small area for most of his time. Rooke is more than happy to call Stowmouth his home, and enjoys nothing more than working in the warm summer sun down in the old quay, shunting supplies to and from the ships. With a history such as that between Rooke and Bride, it is known that Rooke took the news that Bride would be withdrawn and scrapped very hard indeed. Having been around 15 years since his last dealings with loss, and with the engine that helped him get over it the last time being the one finally meeting her fate, time will only tell how he deals with the loss after Bride's exit that summer night. At least his friendship with Bride's supposed replacement, Stan the Black Five, was already well established at the point of her withdrawal. Lord Stovell is sure Rooke will continue to provide faithful service to the island for many years to come. Thanks for watching this episode of the Tales of New Wessex character profiles. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, I'm putting up a poll in the Patreon section on my Discord server to decide who is next to cover in this series, so if you want a certain character to be next, be sure to sign up as a $1 Patreon and join my Discord server to cast your vote. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.